Hello and welcome to this edition of Race to Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh. We've got lots lined up for you over the course of the next 30 minutes. But here's a quick look at the top election stories. Monster hurricanes on one side, and there is a mega political storm that's in fact brewing on the other. And stuck in the middle are the American voters who are trying to grapple with a natural disaster and also the strident election rhetoric, with just another 26 days more to go before the day of voting in the United States of America. And in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing an alarming decline to his popularity, the kind that was last witnessed towards the end of Rishi Sunak's tenure. So what does this say about the Labour leader's future as the Prime Minister? And more importantly, can he turn the tide of this downward spiral? So as hurricanes batter several American states, the upcoming presidential election is kicking up a storm of its own. Now, Kamala Harris has slammed her political rival Donald Trump for putting politics over people with respect to natural disasters. On Tuesday, the Democrat presidential nominee accused her Republican rival of not having any empathy or sympathy for the people. Now, Harris's accusation came in the backdrop of Donald Trump reportedly spreading misinformation about the government's response to Hurricane Helen. As agencies are grappling with the disaster relief and mitigation, Donald Trump has repeatedly said that the White House under Joe Biden is diverting disaster relief funds to unrelated migrant programs. In response to this accusation, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has issued a statement on its official website, fact-checking Donald Trump's claims. The FEMA statement says that the rumors about disaster funds being diverted is completely false, and that no money meant for the flood-affected victims has been diverted. Now, the Red Camp's presidential nominee has also repeatedly criticized the Biden administration's response to Hurricane Helen. He has in fact gone as far as saying that the president wasn't picking up calls, and there is an anti-Republican bias in how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responding to the crisis. But this isn't the only thing that Donald Trump has made false or unsubstantiated statements on this week. Now, in a radio interview, the former American president claimed that he had visited the Gaza Strip while answering a question on the region. However, there is no evidence whatsoever of Donald Trump having visited the war-torn enclave.
It could be better than Monaco. It has the best location in the Middle East, the best water, the best everything. It is the best. I've said it for years. When I've been there, and it's rough. It's a rough place before all of the attacks and before back and forth. What's happened over the last couple of years.
With less than a month to go for the elections in the country, several states are already conducting mail voting and early ballots as well in the run-up to the 5th of November elections. The Democrat candidate Kamala Harris and her Republican opponent Donald Trump are stuck in a complete polling loop, where both candidates are being cited for victory across various surveys. Now, a recent poll shows that a majority of the black registered voters support Kamala Harris. The poll conducted in the middle of September found that 7 in 10 black members have favorable opinion of Kamala Harris, with a few differences between black men and women voters on how they view the Democrat candidate. Now, the black voters' opinion of Donald Trump, by contrast, appears to be overwhelmingly negative, underscoring the challenge that the Republican candidate faces as he's seeking to erode Kamala Harris' support amongst black men. Now, Trump supporter and business tycoon Elon Musk is making just as many waves as the presidential nominees are. Just days ahead of the election, this time round, it is Musk's comments on Kamala Harris that have raised a number of eyebrows. Now, the billionaire maverick owner of Tesla and also the owner of the social media platform X revisited the conversation of a now-deleted controversial tweet of his in which he expressed surprise as to why no one had tried to assassinate the vice president. Now, in an interview, Musk upped the ante on the topic of political assassinations, saying that he had deleted his old tweet because it would be pointless to assassinate the incumbent leaders. Now, talking about his controversial post, he said, and I quote, "I made a joke which I realized I deleted, which is like nobody's even bothering to try kill Kamala because it's pointless. What you achieve just by another puppet." However, there have been several instances of death threats against the Democrat presidential nominee. The American authorities have arrested individuals on multiple instances after they made death threats against Harris and Biden. In August, a man from Virginia was arrested and charged with making threats against Kamala Harris.
I have been privileged and proud.
All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment in the American elections, in terms of the rhetoric, the strident rhetoric that we are hearing from the leaders there, we're joined by our correspondent Susan Terani, who's joining us live from New York, and she, of course, is tracking all the details very, very closely indeed. Now, Susan, this is an election that is being watched across the world, and some of the rhetoric that is coming out is almost bizarre. Let's, in fact, start with the statement that was made by Donald Trump when he said that this incumbent administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is diverting the funds that are meant ideally for relief work of those who are affected in the various hurricanes that are hitting the United States to migrants who are coming into the United States. How is this playing up on the minds of the voters there?
So there are different programs in FEMA for different allocations. It's not completely false. Considering the fact that even under the Trump administration, as far back as the Reagan administration, slices of FEMA money, while FEMA is known for disaster relief, slices of that money has gone to the issue of migrants in different cities, notably big urban cities like New York and California. Now, whether or not now that money that's allocated only to the hurricane relief efforts, any of that is being taken out and given to migrants, that's where the question is, and that's where this controversy has come. But to say that FEMA has not allocated any money to the migrant issue and the migrant crisis, notably under the Biden administration, well, that itself is false as well. Even Donald Trump did it as well. And like I mentioned, administrations before that. So that's one thing about the FEMA issue. But another thing is when you talk about the people in these storm-ravaged, hurricane-ravaged areas, what they're saying is the last thing on their mind is the elections coming up. They're thinking about rebuilding. They're thinking about getting their lives back together. And, you know, rhetorics like these make good headlines, but ultimately the people that are most affected are just thinking about how they can get the most help possible, not just from FEMA, but from anyone who's willing to help them.
Absolutely, indeed. And these people, when they step up to vote on the day of the polling, of course, will make their sentiment very loudly heard to these politicians. Now, the other issue that we need to talk about is what Elon Musk has again brought back, the issue of political assassinations. One, it is completely insensitive to talk in terms of why is no one trying to assassinate X, Y, or Z. But what is the point that Elon Musk is trying to make here? He's a billionaire, one of the world's richest men, if not the richest guys around. He's also the owner of the Twitter platform. Why would he bring up something like why are people not trying to assassinate XYZ candidate in this election?
That comes from the sentiment of many people that would agree with him that Kamala Harris basically just fit the mold of the Democrat Party, and that, you know, if it wasn't, well, it's an insensitive comment, of course, but if it's not Kamala, then it would be someone else that would follow the same ideology. And one of the reasons for that is because she didn't win a primary. She was sort of inserted into the election campaign after President Biden went out of the campaign. So a lot of sentiment is around the fact that, you know, it's not about the person for the Democratic Party, it's about the ideology. Of course, it was distasteful for him to, you know, maybe mention it in that sense. But Elon Musk is eccentric, and he says things in a way that, again, makes headlines on the one hand and has people talking about him on the other.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Susan Terani, for joining us and getting us those details there. All right, let's now shift our attention to the United Kingdom, where less than 100 days since the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was sworn in, his favourability has plummeted to a whole new low. Now, according to a poll conducted by YouGov, currently only 27% of the Britons who were quizzed in this survey have a positive opinion of their incumbent Prime Minister. Now, that's his lowest rating with the pollsters since September 2021. And believe it or not, 63% of the people who were asked whether they thought highly of Keir Starmer had a negative opinion on him. Now, the highest score against him so far is this. This gives Keir Starmer a net approval rating of -36. He's now almost as unpopular as Nigel Farage, who has a net favourability of -35, a point more, with some 28% having a positive view on him, compared to 63% with a negative view. Now, the numbers are particularly striking given Labour's landslide victory at the British general elections just 3 months ago. The party had won 411 seats out of the 650-seat parliament. Now, since assuming power, the Labour government has faced one allegation after another, such as Starmer and other ministers accepting freebies from donors and lobbyists, political allies being preferred for civil service jobs, and discontent amongst the government's special advisers. However, Starmer is still less unpopular than his predecessor to the post, Rishi Sunak. Now, Rishi Sunak had a net favourability score of -42, with 66% of the people holding a negative view of him and just 24% of the people who were quizzed expressing a positive outlook on Rishi Sunak.
You voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
All right, now to help us make sense of this pretty dramatic turnaround of fortunes for Keir Starmer, we're being joined by Mr. Adam Schwartz, who is joining us live from London. Mr. Schwartz is a writer and a political commentator. Mr. Schwartz, thank you very much indeed, sir, for making time for our viewers here in WION. Let me in fact start off by asking you this. He won 411 seats out of a 650-seat parliament. That was just 3 months ago. This should be his honeymoon period. But what we're looking is Keir Starmer stumbling from one controversy to another. What's going wrong?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to highlight the fact that, of course, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer won such a huge majority. But crucially, the Labour Party won that huge majority on only 33.7% of the vote, which historically is a very low percentage of the public to actually win, to win any kind of majority in Parliament, let alone such a huge majority. I think also even going into the election at the time, Keir Starmer had quite a low favourability rating for typically, someone who's about to become Prime Minister. So I think really both of those factors really leave both Starmer and the government typically in a sort of more vulnerable way than actually a new government with a huge majority might be. Now, I would say that, Labour has actually enacted quite popular policies really so far. It's initiated legislation to increase the rights of renters. It has started the process of bringing train services under public ownership. It's moved forward plans to strengthen workplace rights. And all of those things, when polled, are actually show to be quite popular. But really the major issue that we're seeing is the fact that actually there have only kind of been two major stories that have kind of penetrated through to public opinion at the moment. And that is, as you mentioned, firstly, the decision to restrict, winter fuel payments to pensioners. And secondly, the revelations about the gifts and donations to Keir Starmer. I think those are both particularly bad in terms of optics for the government, because it's a government that actually came into power on the basis of promising change, both in the sense of changing the kind of austerity policies that were associated with public spending costs from the previous government, but also in terms of some of the ethics and corruption issues that we sort of saw plaguing the Conservative governments. Right. I think, one major issue as well is that that's kind of been combined with what I would say is quite a surprisingly chaotic sort of running of 10 Downing Street. We saw on Sunday Sue Gray, Keir Starmer's chief of staff, actually depart the role just after a couple of months, really. So really, I think that has actually been a major factor that has impacted the ability of the government to kind of push communications going forward. So I think overall, in terms of what Keir Starmer needs to do, is needs to return order to number 10, of course, but also to kind of return to the narrative of the purpose of the government, in terms of a government that's trying to bring renewal, but also in terms of the kind of government's mission, in terms of
Mr. Schwartz, if I can just interject there, problem is Britain is, of course, going through a pretty difficult time. One was hoping that Keir Starmer would bring about some kind of normalcy and will focus on issues that matter to the British public. The winter is coming. A couple of years back, we saw these very difficult scenes of people having to make the choice between eating or heating. And here we've got Keir Starmer, who's now cutting down the allowances that are given to people for the winter. Do we expect economically for Keir Starmer to bring in policies that actually make it easier for people in Britain to tide over the winter?
Well, we have the budget coming up in not too long, so I think certainly we'll find that out. But I would say, in terms of what the government under the Labour Party is trying to do, in terms of trying to kind of restore stability to the country, really focuses on two major issues. The first, as you mentioned, is really the economy. We've had very sluggish growth really for a long time. Certainly if you look at the way that we've grown over the past sort of 5 years compared to comparable industrial economies, actually we've had very poor growth, and that's had a particular impact upon low and middle earners. So really, the government's trying to push, policies towards trying to grow the economy as much as possible. But I would say, in terms of the way that the government sees it, they see a return to kind of economic stability really as a kind of major cornerstone and a necessity to actually to do those kind of policies. But I would say, really, in terms of the government trying to restore the UK's position as a sort of prosperous, stable nation, really it's public services and the economy which it's going to focus on.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Schwartz, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Now, Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has dissolved the parliament, paving the way for early elections in Japan to be held in the country. Now, Ishiba dissolved the lower house of the parliament. The snap general elections are scheduled to be held on the 27th of October.
日本国憲法第7条により衆議院を解散する。
Now, the Prime Minister said that the elections are an opportunity to create a new Japan. The polls will come a year earlier than scheduled, with Ishiba making the announcement just moments after he assumed office, succeeding Fumio Kishida, who stepped aside due to growing public distrust. Now, soon after taking office, Ishiba pledged to announce a new economic package to help combat a lingering cost of living crisis in Japan. Now, ahead of the elections, which are likely to see the ruling party, the LDP, return to power again, Ishiba also made a critical change to his cabinet that can potentially have a diplomatic ripple effect. Now, Ishiba has now abolished a ministerial post that was dedicated to economic cooperation with Moscow. This move is being seen as a decisive step away from his predecessor's approach towards having good relations with Russia. The Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi confirmed this decision, telling reporters that Ishiba had personally chosen to abolish the post. It could signify a shift in Tokyo's strategy regarding the long-standing territorial dispute over the islands of Hokkaido. Now, Moscow reacted to Ishiba's decision, with a foreign ministry spokesperson declaring that Russia has plenty of potential partners should Japan choose to stop its energy imports. However, despite the latest move, there are no signs that Tokyo has plans to severing ties entirely. It remains to be seen if this move has any impact on the voters ahead of the polls. Now, Kenya's deputy president is one step closer to being dismissed from office. The National Assembly has voted to impeach Rigathi Gachagua. The lawmakers voted 281 to 44 to impeach the leader, with one parliamentarian choosing to abstain from the voting process. The National Assembly has set the ball rolling, and it is now up to the Senate to decide the deputy president's fate. Next week, Kenya's Senate is expected to debate whether to dismiss Gachagua or not. The senators will be investigated the allegations against Gachagua next week, following which there will be a vote. If at least two-thirds of the Senate votes to uphold the impeachment, then the deputy president will be dismissed. With his fate to be decided in the next few days, Gachagua has vowed to keep fighting for his position. The leader faces a slew of allegations, including stirring ethnic hatred and undermining the government. Now, Kenya's President William Ruto is yet to comment publicly on the developments and the possible dismissal that his number two faces. The rift between Ruto and his deputy became publicly known after deadly protests earlier this year against the proposed tax increase and the cost of living. So as the country waits to see the deputy president's fate unfold, the Kenyans have mixed reactions to the proceedings.
It is so unfortunate that they turned up in large numbers to go and impeach our deputy president, and yet there are other factors that are affecting us, which they cannot deal with them as they dealt with that issue of impeachment of the deputy president. If my opinion will count, I will say they will have gone, both of them, both the president and the vice president, because they failed this country in a big way. Ever since they got into office, there's nothing that we're seeing that is going on. All what is happening is looting of public resources, and we are very much angry with this government.
And our correspondent Louisa Olani has sent us this report. Listen.
59-year-old Rigathi has been at the center of controversy over his remarks on governance and alleged favoritism. The appointers that calls for his ouster reflects deeper tensions within the ruling coalition and are seen as a power struggle ahead of the next election. However, his allies argue that these efforts are politically motivated and unlikely to succeed without substantial backing from within the government. Well, the next 10 days stand significant as Senate proceedings continue, highlighting the complex dynamics shaping Kenya's leadership. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION, World is One.
The people of Mozambique are out on the streets to cast their ballot in the general elections that many expect the ruling party will win again. And WION's Calden Ongwung has brought us this report on the candidates who are vying for the top job and the issues that the people will be voting for. Take a look.
Mozambicans took to the polls on Wednesday. It's a tense general election expected to once again return power to the ruling party. Frelimo has governed the southern African nation since 1975. 4 candidates are vying to replace President Filipe Nyusi as he steps down after serving 2 terms. The favourite is Daniel Chapo, a lawyer viewed as a safe choice and a fresh face for the long-ruling party. He faces off against Venancio Mondlane, a charismatic independent candidate who draws huge crowds, main opposition leader and former rebel commander Osufo Momad, and a small opposition party leader Lutero Simango. As polling stations opened in Inhambane, voters expressed their hopes.
I hope that the elected president will be the best for our country and will improve conditions in the country, and that the elections are free, clean and transparent. I hope we won't have fraud in the country and that the elections are fair and just.
Frelimo first allowed elections in 1994 and has since been accused of rigging them, charges it denies. A disputed outcome would probably trigger protests, similar to those which were forcefully suppressed after Frelimo swept last year's municipal elections. Nyusi called for calm after casting his vote in central Maputo.
We are asking all citizens to not create disorder and not agitate others as well, so that everything happens peacefully.
Poverty is the major concern of Mozambique's 35 million people, half of whom are registered to vote. The country is also grappling with an Islamist insurgency in the north that has forced thousands to flee their homes and halted multi-billion-dollar gas projects.
People of Mozambique are expected to come out in numbers to cast their votes today. According to the election body, voting stations across the country opened at 7 a.m. and is expected to close at 6 p.m. Mozambique's National Elections Commission says over 17 million people have registered and they are expected to cast their votes at various stations nationally and in foreign countries, including South Africa. In terrorist-hit province of Cabo Delgado, electoral officials are escorted by soldiers in helicopters. Some political analysts have predicted the ruling party Frelimo to win easily, with 47-year-old Daniel Chapo as the presidential candidate. However, there are some who say that with an authoritarian government, the will of the people will not win, meaning the elections will not be free and fair. This is Calden Ongwung from Johannesburg, South Africa. For WION, World is One.
And that's all the time we have in this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
Well, I'd like to congratulate WION for launching this new show, WION Business Masters. And I think this will be a stellar edition because the world of business is at the very heart of what the real world is about. So I think integrating this in the WION content calendar is a great idea, and I congratulate you for it.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I actually pushed myself right out of the damn tournament.